Coming up, in this week's IndigiPolitics segment, we talk with John Tahsuda about South Carolina politics and why 40% of Republicans said no to Trump at the primaries. And a Navajo Nation Council member speaks on the harms scammers have done to Native families seeking help through sober living homes. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. A South African man is found guilty of a gruesome murder of 2 Alaska Native women. Brian Smith was found guilty of first-degree murder earlier this month after videotaping and narrating the torture of an Alaska Native woman until her death. Smith was arrested after a woman stole his cell phone from his truck and discovered the footage from 2019. The woman later turned the footage over to police. The Anchorage jury came to unanimous guilty verdict after deliberating for less than 2 hours. After showing no reaction to his guilty verdict, Smith confessed to killing another Alaska Native woman whose body was previously found but never identified. Staying in Alaska, Indigenous advocates say they are hopeful that the Donlin gold mine can be stopped. The balance for the Kuskokwim River Act was introduced in the Alaska State Legislature by State Representative C.J. McCormick. The bill would protect water quality in the Kuskokwim River and support the traditional lifestyles of Alaska Native people. Construction for the $60 million project has not started, but if built, would be the largest gold mine in the world. The area is a source of fishing for the Yupik, Cupik, and Athabascan people, and the project could increase the temperature of the water, which could make it more difficult for salmon to survive. The Klamath River has been named the 2024 River of the Year by American Rivers. The Yurok and Karuk tribes have been gathering support to undam the Klamath for decades. River Champion Awards were given to the tribes, the states of Washington and Oregon, and other partners. The Klamath received national attention in 2002 when an estimated 70,000 salmon were killed by toxic bacteria. Currently, 4 dams are in the process of removal. Barry McCovey, who directs the Yurok fisheries, says there is still more work to be done.
To get to the end of the race and get dam removal completed is going to take, we still got a lot of work to do. But to get to this point where the river's now free flowing through holes in the dams, but the river is connected again for the first time in over 100 years.
In Canada, First Nations citizens are suing radiologists over allegedly conducting secret medical experiments. According to the lawsuit, 59 members of the Pictou Landing First Nation were subjected to invasive MRI scans between 2017 and 2018. The radiologists allegedly conducted experiments to study the livers and organs of Indigenous patients, leaving many feeling violated and humiliated. These experiments were conducted without permission and used for research purposes without patient knowledge. Canada has a dark history in its treatment of Indigenous people in healthcare, with systemic racism persisting into present day. The complaint was filed to Nova Scotia Supreme Court in June of 2020 and was recently certified as a class action lawsuit earlier this month. A Washington tribe is planning to sue the EPA unless it revisits a failed state plan to address high water temperatures affecting protected salmon species. The Swinomish Indian tribal community says it will sue the EPA for violations of the Endangered Species Act. In a letter to the EPA, the tribe says it has seen an 80% decline in its salmon harvest over the past 2 decades. Elevated temperatures have been caused by the lack of vegetated streamside habitat, also known as riparian vegetation. The loss of salmon has forced tribal citizens to buy and freeze salmon for cultural ceremonies. Well, homemade salsas, tamales, and other foods made in a home kitchen and requiring refrigeration may become legal to sell to the public under a new bill in Arizona. Earlier this month, House Bill 2042, or the Tamale Bill, passed through the Arizona House with unanimous support. Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed the original bill last year, but is on board with the new bill after some revisions. The revisions include what constitutes a home kitchen and having appropriate certifications. Current approved foods include homemade jams, donuts, tortillas, and honey. This leaves homemade foods like pies, salsas, tamales, and butter off the table. On this week's IndigiPolitics, we talk about the nearly 40% of Republican voters who rejected Trump in the South Carolina primary. They opted for former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Here to talk more about this is ICT political correspondent Pauly Denetclaw and regular contributor John Tahsuda. He is a principal with Navigators Global.
Thank you so much again for joining the newscast, John.
It's great to be back.
South Carolina's Republican primary was this past weekend. Trump did win, but pundits and politicos are talking about the 40% of voters who did reject Trump in favor of Nikki Haley. Is this significant, and should the Trump campaign be worried when it comes to the general election?
Well, I think it continues to show popularity for former Secretary Haley, former Governor Haley in her home state. And the outcome probably reflects more of sort of this just hometown comfort with her as a candidate, and rather than any distaste for President Trump in South Carolina. He's hugely popular there. So I think it's a positive for her, though, in the sense that it shows sort of maybe continued popularity for her as she possibly moves on from this campaign and looks to future years and to remain as a candidate for the party. But certainly continues to show, very strong support for President Trump, coming out of this. 60%, still very strong. There's no other candidates in the race now, so it's really a two-person race, and probably shows, some strength for Governor Haley in that folks who might be a little disaffected with former President Trump, or those who are looking for an alternative candidate, maybe, turning out for her. She certainly appealed to a broad swath of her home folks.
And considering how healthy Haley's campaign fundraising has been, according to the recent FEC filings, do you think that her campaign will make it to Super Tuesday? She has stated that she will go forth to Super Tuesday, but candidates tend to change their mind. What is your perspective?
Well, she has made that commitment, and at this point, I'm not sure that there's anything long-term damaging to her prospects if she continues to go through to Super Tuesday. I do think that in some regards, it's often better for even a front-runner candidate like Mr. Trump to have somebody so that your campaign remains focused on message, focused on trying to appeal to the widest number of voters in your party. And so sometimes that attention strays a little bit when you've got it all wrapped up really early. So I think that is, in some regards, that's a good aspect of her staying in, even for the Trump campaign. And my understanding is that one of her big financial backers, which is one of the interest groups funded by the Koch brothers, has indicated that they will probably not be funding support for her campaign, et cetera, moving forward. but she does still have a very robust, campaign fundraising for herself, and I would imagine probably has enough to carry her through to Super Tuesday.
And John, can you talk a little bit about the importance of campaign finances and having, healthy fundraising for campaigns and the difference that it makes for candidates?
Certainly. So one of the things that you look for in the fundraising, a lot of candidates can show healthy dollar numbers, et cetera, but you want to take a look behind that sort of first picture and see what is it showing. And so and again, another positive for Governor Haley is that she has a lot of individual donations. Those are things you look for because that's an indication of people who voters who are actually putting their money behind you, as opposed to a PAC or some kind of interest group, right? So so that remains a positive for her again, and that may be an indication that she still has a bright future in the party after Mr. Trump either wins or doesn't win. But there will be she's still in sort of the prime of her political life, her career, and so there certainly would be, it seems like, a good opportunity. And so when you think also about that, if you're a candidate in her spot and it's looking pretty dim that you're going to reach ultimate success for the nomination, but that does show also a future. So you have shown an ability to attract not just groups and PACs, but you're able to turn out individual voters to support your candidacy. And the other thing is that those people kind of remain in a bank for you. And so when 4 years, 8 years from now, whenever you launch again, that's an immediate source of financing, of campaign financing that you turn to. And it shows, again, assuming that they will turn out for you again, they remain interested in you, that shows both the ability to raise money, but the ability to excite interest in voters. And so, again, I think, the longer she stays in and she shows this sort of strength with individual voters is in many ways good for her long term.
And Trump's campaign is burning through money, funding his legal fees. And how does this impact Trump's campaign? And also, how do his legal struggles impact his ability to campaign in general?
If Governor Haley is no longer in it, but that there will be plenty of money to finance his campaign, both sort of from his campaign directly, but also from the Republican Party, the RNC. They will have plenty of money to fund that. I don't think that's really a concern long term for the campaign. The other issue is, the legal woes, as people call them, it's so interesting because in many ways, it's actually been a benefit to him. At a time when President Biden is under a lot of criticism on fronts, it's been a way for President Trump to stay in the spotlight, kept his name out there, reminding people who he is. And there's a strong core of folks who really feel like these things are targeted at him from a political basis, and so that sort of strengthens their resolve to continue to support and try to push his campaign forward. So in many ways, if the intent of these attacks, these legal attacks, were to try to sink his candidacy, I think they backfired in many ways. They made his candidacy stronger in many ways. It's certainly funded additional fundraising as well for him. Every time there's a big announcement out of one of these courts, there's several $1 million that pour into his campaign coffers. So,
well, John, that's all the time that we have. Thank you again so much for joining the newscast and sharing your knowledge with us.
Always fun. Talk anytime. Thank you.
A foundation that supports Indigenous artists is celebrating the tenure of its founding CEO. Lulani Arquette is retiring as the founding executive at the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. Shirley Sneve has this interview.
Incorporated in 2007 after an extensive study led by the Ford Foundation, a resource was created for American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian creatives. In 2009, Lulani Arquette became the first CEO of the Native Arts and Culture Foundation.
It was a real interesting, it's been an incredible ride, I guess is the best way to say it. And we came in 2009, right after the recession. remember the recession of 2008. So a lot of time funders, and we still had to raise a lot of, like any other nonprofit, we're a foundation. We had some great early starting monies, but we were tasked with raising money, and everybody was sort of, closing in, trying to take care of their own situations in tribes and figure out how to distribute money after 2008. So we came in and we did figure it out in the best way we could. But I think some of the early accomplishments were just the travel and development of the relationships that I and my colleague and my staff and our board, my board knew a lot of people, obviously, and that was really important for me to meet the organizations and people that were very much involved in the arts and cultures fields, and then really establishing kind of our mark. And I think our mark was really this support and raising the visibility and incredible voices of contemporary Native artists. It wasn't really being supported in great ways. And when I say contemporary Native artists, us as contemporary peoples, that contemporary Native art that a lot of time was often being questioned by the broader community of, is that Native art? Is it art and traditional practices? Is it art that's using materials that have not been used before? All those questions and discussions happen. I think that has been one of our that we feel really good about, is that idea of expanding sort of this canon of contemporary Native art. And so many of our, the over 400 Native artists that we've supported in the last 15 years have gone on to just do incredible work. They're from all different kinds of tribes and Native Hawaiian community and Alaska Native communities, and have gone on to do international work and win awards, the MacArthur Award, Genius Awards. We have several of them, the United States Artist Awards. It just goes on and on. And at the time when we support them, they were more maybe at beginning or mid-career stage. We started out with fellowships. And at the time, there weren't a lot of fellowships being awarded. They weren't using, the fellowship wasn't being, particularly in Native communities. And so we started out really with fellowships and then supporting some organizations in the field. What we began to see is the amount of work that the artists were doing to bring more attention to issues of importance in our tribal communities and our Native communities around all kinds of things, the many social issues and some of the challenges we've had, as well as to uplift and make visible the strengths and assets we had in our tribal and Native communities. So it was kind of both of those. I'm so inspired by the creativity of artists and culture bearers across this nation. Their voices, the work that they're doing is really, really astounding to me. And it is taking things that you would think, especially nowadays in the last 3 to 5 years, and maybe 5 years or so, really bringing in some of what you would consider, if we label things, sort of traditional kinds of practices, and they're integrating and creating and infusing them with their contemporary lives that we live today, and what in the history of yesterday with the contemporary times of today. And it's just that kind of work that you're seeing is really, really powerful. Times have changed, I see. And there's new ways of looking at even what leadership is, I've noticed. I think focus and priority is really important, because there's a tendency to want to do everything and too much. And I think that's happened because of these right here. People are constantly stimulated. And so we want to do too much. There's just too much stimulation almost. And there's a tendency, I want to support this, or I want to do this, or I want to do this. I think, have a discussion with your community, your funders, your staff, and prioritize what's important, that's in line with your mission and values. And then, and listen to the voices of the community that you're serving. That's really important because that's changing too. And then I would also say to care. Take time to care for ourselves as arts workers is so important, because this is hard work. Running organizations and particularly in leadership roles, and we're all leaders. We all bring, but whatever your title is, you're still a leader. You're a leader in your own respective right of whatever your job description or your work is. But when you're talking about a formal leader in an organization, I think self-care is really important.
We are all children born of water. It is where all life begins. Water embraces and protects us. We revere it in our homes. We need to live close to water. It nourishes and cleanses us. All living things know this. Sometimes water is gentle and floats in the air. Sometimes water is harsh and powerful. Sometimes it catches the sun's rays. Water changes with the seasons, alive and always moving, even when no one is looking. Water is patient. Water endures. Water brings clarity. Water purifies our thoughts. Water brings us together. Water is holy. Water helps us heal. Water is medicine.
Here in Arizona, tribes and governments are working together to protect vulnerable communities in a number of sober living scams. ICT's Paris Wise has the story.
For over a year now, sober living home fraud in Arizona has brought harm to Native families and relatives seeking help. Scammers took people from their communities, offering an empty promise of care, food, and shelter, but in some cases actually offered drugs and alcohol, resulting in the death of patients. Navajo Nation Council Speaker Crystalline Curley recounts one family's experience with their missing relative, one of many cases.
Eventually, about six months into his whole search, and he eventually just turned back at home. And he said he just escaped and he didn't want to be there no more. He just left with his backpack, and he never got his identification back. And he just went to the streets to earn as much money as he could to hitchhike back home. So this is one of the best scenario stories that I know and encountered with this whole issue. I know there's a lot of families out there that unfortunately a lot of their relatives did not make it home. A lot of our Navajo relatives have died in these homes over to overdose of the availability of drugs and alcohol in these sober living homes.
With such little regulation to open a rehab facility, the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, also known as ACCESS, funded these homes. Now, the state and tribes, including Navajo Nation, are bringing forward what they hope is a legislation that can save lives and penalize those to blame.
Within Arizona's side, we're trying to look at policy. And Senator Hatafi has been very active this legislative session in Arizona, presenting a bill to restrict and regulate these establishments of sober living homes and creating fees to start, penalizing these sober living homes. So it's a huge push. This is only a little tip of the iceberg that we're fighting for, that at least these types of bills will lay that foundation towards access reform, so our people don't have to be exploited for monetary gain. We really hope that it puts some stronger regulations on these sober living homes. Safety conditions, making sure that these facilities have credible services. I know a lot of these places are not even, up to standards of being a healthcare facility or a treatment center, or, none of those things are in place, or even having the appropriate healthcare providers within these facilities. And we did get a report from Attorney General Mays. She said that this has caused access to pay over $1 billion in fraud. So compared to having our Native people being exploited for over $1 billion out of this program, it's a state-funded program that there needs to be some sort of accountability taking place.
Speaker Curley says they will find out if the bill will pass in the next legislative session. But for now, there is more at stake.
The other side is that justice needs to be served, that these bad actors should not be getting away with a lot of the things that happen to our people. If it was even providing unreliable or inadequate services at these homes just to get monetary gain. There are some cases that are being prosecuted, and we are so glad that Attorney General within Arizona is behind us and stating that she's prioritizing this and that prosecution does need to happen.
Paris Wise, ICT News.
That is a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.